My opinion is it's always changed, and it's going to continue to change. The first thing you got to understand about downtown is it was at one time only one main street, which was Monterey Street. It was the street to Monterey, which was the state capital at that time. Higuera Street couldn't really develop until you bridged the creek so you could get wagons and horse teams across the creek, and that didn't happen until about the 1870s. So you have a whole series of economic pressures that determine the look of a town. The earliest buildings in town were almost all multi-story because you needed a lot of hotel rooms, but you needed them upstairs. And so, because we were midway between LA and San Francisco, and it took more than a day to get there. Most of downtown grew between the arrival of the railroad and the Great Depression. The railroad came in 1894, and suddenly we were connected to the north, at least. One of the best photographs we have of our downtown was taken from a balloon that was 1905, I believe was the date, and it lifted off from the grounds around the Ramona Hotel, and you could pay to take a ride in a lighter than air balloon. And the photographer photographed the downtown from there, and it is a huge reference piece for us in looking at what was on the ground in that year. You can literally find individual buildings. So fire changed everything, and so what you'll find is a block like this, which had a lot of wooden false front buildings, slowly became replaced with masonry buildings. And you can see the original shutters are still on the Lewis building. Those shutters actually closed when there was a fire going on somewhere nearby. Every town used to be a horse town. You know, you had bridle makers and stables, and the whole town had, and major intersections even now, like up here at Oso Street, there was a stable there. In fact, the width of Higuera was determined by the U-turn capacity of a buckboard. How do you turn a buckboard around with a team of horses? That's how wide your street needed to be. And why now, if you go to Marsh Street, which is a newer street, its width is designed to the width of cars. So it's a wider street. The lanes are wider and the speed is faster because it's built to accommodate cars, where you feel kind of pinched here on Higuera Street. The transition from horsepower to internal combustion powered vehicles was enormous, and it happened in a period of about 10 years. It didn't take long. After the Depression, it wasn't economic to build multi-story buildings, and so a lot of the single-story buildings you see here were built in the 30s, 40s, 50s, that there was no need to build above because you didn't have anybody to rent it. You people don't like chain stores. Well, hey, you know, the joke I say is, hey, the mission was a chain, you know, that's our founding. You know, San Antonio is a good example. It's a great mission. It's on the El Camino. It was on the path to all the other missions, but it somehow didn't have another reason to be there. And right here, the reason for us is the grade. More than anything, it's the grade. And then the way that architecture here evolved, that it would look like Wichita. You know, it was a Midwestern architectural expression, and so was this. I look at this building, that building before it was stuccoed over. They were basically Midwestern building architectural forms. And it wasn't until later, like across here at the Weinman, which became Spanish, but that was done later on in the late 20s. It was a big thing about coming to the West to experience that Spanish colonial architecture and the climate that went with it. And a stopover on the road to San Francisco or LA, and that's why we've got the Motel Inn, the first motel. One of the saddest stories is the use of the narrow gauge railroad, which of course predated the SP, because it was used near the end to move materials to build a highway, which completely made it obsolete. The trees were planted and they completely changed the character of the downtown. And it became a cooler place, a shadier place. The other thing that the trees did is they created a homogeneity to the architecture, which doesn't really exist. These buildings don't all go together, but it creates a sense of unity. I think the big issue today's downtown, there are people who feel that it's changing too much, too quickly. Anything that doesn't change starts to stagnate. So you need to have new ideas, new expressions. Downtown, which used to be the only option for purchasing goods, is now the place you go to have an experience that can't be purchased elsewhere. And that's going to be something like enjoying the creek walk or visiting the mission or having a nice meal somewhere in a restaurant. Those are things, those are experiences. And the future of all downtowns in America, I think, are going to be based on experiences. Those are the things that are going to keep our downtowns alive. And I think that's extremely important. And San Luis Obispo has done better with that than most cities.